we're back. Nightmare Success, in and out listeners. Man, do I have a story for you guys and a guest today. You know, you hear these stories, and it's, a lot of times you see these stories and Netflix and whatever. I've got a guy who actually lived it, and I don't want to get too far into giving his story away, but so Wade Williamson, he he lived through a situation where somebody literally came to his house, said he was going to kill him, and he had to defend himself, and he had to live through 4.5 years of the wildest, craziest story I've heard in a while. And I was telling you before we got on that I was watching him on Matt Cox's, and I was like, man, I can't wait to interview Wade and have him tell his story to you guys. You know, we come here to this place for, you know, what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? How do you adapt and survive? Wade did it. I mean, he survived this because, you know, he had to live with the fact that when all this happened and how this came down, it took 4.5 years for him to figure out if he's going to be spending the rest of his life in prison or if he was going to walk free. So it is a story. Before we get into it, I want to welcome our new sponsor. It's not really a new sponsor. Our big sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes to go spend a couple of weeks walking lots, looking for a car. Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. You know, it's kind of like going to the dentist. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle getting a car. Auto Plaza Direct. They are your personal car concierge. So you tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they will go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price and deliver that car to you in any state. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge. The new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Okay, Wade Williamson, let's get into this.
What, my friend?
How are you doing, man? Thanks for coming today.
No problem. Looking forward to it. I'm about as good as can be.
You are so much better than spending life in prison by a long shot.
Yeah. I mean, like, so I have to look at it now, like even on bad days, it's still better than what I was looking at it at one point in time. So that kind of helps me look through things with a different set of eyes, so to speak. Whenever I have, you know, what I might consider now a bad day, I just think of how much worse it could have been if things would have.
Oh man, so true. And you've done some things while you were going through this that were really cool. You've got a big show on YouTube that's called Crime and Entertainment, and have had some big celebrities on there. Got a lot of subscribers. Very cool show. I checked that out. Let's go back a little bit, Wade. Where did Wade grow up? What was he doing? Let's get to know Wade. Where were you before all this happened?
I grew up in a small town called Darlington, South Carolina. And listeners that follow NASCAR may know where that is, because that's really about the only thing that you can associate with it. It was a very small town, you know, like maybe 2 public elementary schools. I mean, very, very small. I lived literally right behind the racetrack for many, many years. So when that weekend would come, back when I was growing up, they actually had 2 races a year there. And I mean, that town turned into like a whole nother place for about 4 or 5 days, you know, a couple of days before on up until the race was over. I mean, it was crazy.
Big deal.
Yeah. And so it kind of put our little town on the map there for a period of time. And I stayed there until 2010. And then I was engaged to be married at the time to my fiance, and we moved to Charleston, South Carolina. This is probably about 2.5 hours up the road. And the reason why I moved there, I got a job with a pretty good steel company. I've been a welder pretty much all my life. When I was
okay, welding's a good job.
Yeah, it's one of them things. Like, there are some robotic welding, but at a certain point, our machines are not going to be able to take your job because they just need welders to do certain things. Some things a machine can't do. And that was what I was told. You know, I was told, hey, this is a good trade. And, you know, the teacher even told me this is a job you can do lying down and make $100 an hour if your situation's right. And I said, well, that sounds like something I'd be interested in. So I got on with a company called Nucor Steel, and it's a pretty big steel company, very good benefits. And they would pay out once a year. They would pay into your profit sharing. And usually at the division I was at to start with, they would give anywhere from 7 to 12 grand a year. Now that went
Okay.
straight into your profit sharing, and about 1,000 or 2 went to you. Now I worked at the one in Columbia, South Carolina, and commuted back and forth while I was living in Darlington. I transferred to the one in Charleston and then moved my family to Charleston in 2010 and worked there for another 7 years until the story that we're fixing to get into, they ultimately fired
And
me.
what did you have in your family there, Wade? Was it what all did you have? You had a wife,
I
kids,
had a
seven?
wife, daughter, and a son.
Okay.
When I
Okay.
moved up here, my son was 1 year. He had just been born. He was 1 year old. I think we moved up here at the time.
Okay.
And I mean, for the most part, I mean, things were going good. I mean, the job was going good. My wife had a decent job. Kids were happy. I mean, for all
Sounds
intents and
good.
purposes, everything was going good. And there was I'm not sure if your listeners or you're familiar with Myrtle Beach at all. This is kind of the turning point that started the downward spiral. Myrtle Beach had what was called a Carolina Country Music Fest. It was their first time having this thing. It's basically like a miniature watered down version of Woodstock. I mean, it's
Oh,
3 days
oh
of
wow. Okay.
nothing but country music, partying, drinking, just a good old time. And so we said we were going to go down there and check it out. And we went down there on a Thursday, you know, tied one on Thursday, tied one on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think at one point in the middle, I had a friend of mine that met us down there, and he was actually a licensed medic. Like he
Okay.
drove an ambulance, and he gave me an IV to try to
Oh,
recharge me
oh
because
my God.
yeah, he
That
could
is a
tell I was
country fest.
yeah. I can see why people in Vegas go get those things because it helped.
Yeah. Okay.
It brought me back to life. And but still it was a lot of time, not a lot of sleep, a lot of
Yeah.
partying. And I'd gotten off work, went straight down there and come back the night before I was supposed to go back on day shift. So, obviously I've been gone all weekend. I'm trying to get things straight around the house when I get back, get things prepped to go back to reality. And on the way to work that morning, I just fell asleep, run off the road.
Just flat out tired.
Yeah, just exhausted. And I used to have to be to work at 6 a.m. So I would leave my house at, roughly 4:35, somewhere along in that neighborhood, and just fell asleep, run off the side of the road. I flipped about 7 or 8 times, landed upside down
Oh
on
my
top of a
God,
pickup
Wade.
truck. Yeah.
Good Lord.
On top of that was the only thing that I seen because it was obviously still dark being that time of morning. And when it
At
just,
what
it
point,
flipped.
at what point, Wade, did you know when you were flipping that this, I mean, I can't even imagine.
It was really weird because the road that I was traveling on was a 2-lane road, but it was
Yeah.
being expanded into a 4-lane road. So
Okay.
when I went off, I happened to go off at the period where the construction had paused for that point.
Yeah.
And so I hit like a piece of concrete that kind of sent me airborne. And when you run off the road, you hear, that sound,
Oh yeah. Scary
interstate
sound.
or whatever, it scares
Yeah.
you. Well, I knew I hit something. I heard that initial pow, and then I
Mm-hmm.
could just tell that I wasn't on the road anymore. And when it hit, it kind of barrel rolled corner to corner. And I mean, it was flipping and flipping and flipping. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, all right, I got to stop at some point.
Some point.
And I looked through the windshield, and the last thing I seen was the pickup truck, and I landed dead on top of it, and everything was silent. And I was like, my first initial thought was, I thought I had killed somebody because I thought that car was on the road.
Wait
Well,
a minute. You landed on top of the pickup truck?
on top of it. So my car is upside down on top of the pickup truck. So roof to roof.
Wow.
And I thought I had killed somebody. I really did. I was, my nerves were shot, and I was just like, man. And so I have my seatbelt on, and I'm trying to brace myself so when I undo my seatbelt, I don't fall on my head.
Mm-hmm.
While I was moving around, the car rolled off to the right. So now it's sitting on its passenger door, and the driver's side is up in the air.
Okay.
So I'm trying to like finagle myself to get out. I rolled the window down. The window was shattered, but I had tint on it, so it was able to roll down. And I literally climbed out. I like put a foot on the center console and climbed out and was just sitting there kind of taking it all in. At that point, I realized I was off the road. I was in someone's yard.
I bet you were worried that thing was going to fall on you.
Well, I was. When I was sitting there, I was like, all right, I don't want to jump off this thing and it rock and fall on me. So I was trying to assess like the best way to get down. And a car happened to come riding by on the road. And he's like, dude, are you okay? And I said, man, I think so. And he's like, do you need me to call an ambulance? And I really didn't know at that point if I was hurt.
Probably all the adrenaline and
Yeah,
everything.
with the
Yeah.
adrenaline. I'm like, yeah, go ahead and do it. And he was like, well, I don't got to stay, do I? And I was like, well, I don't guess. I don't know. Maybe he'd been drinking or something, wanted to get on out of there. And I finally found a spot to where I thought it was kind of safe to jump down. I got down and I went and knocked on the guy's door whose car I had just obliterated. And like I said, it's 5 a.m. here. So I'm knocking on the door and he comes and he's like, yeah, what's going on? And I was like, man, that's I had a little wreck. And I said, I landed on your pickup truck out here. And he's like, man, that's my wife's truck. She's had that thing since high school. Like, well, it's gone now.
Gone now.
He looked out and just kind of shook his head and just shut the door. He didn't ask me if I was okay, need a glass of water, need to call the ambulance. He just shut the door and went back to bed, I guess. I don't know what he did.
And that's weird.
Yeah. I was just like, well, at least I let him know. And I go back and I sit down and I wait for the ambulance to come, and they come and they're like, going up to the car and they kicked the back glass out. And it didn't really matter. The car was like missing wheels and I think every part on it was damaged, but I was just kind of sitting there like, what in the heck are they doing? And they were looking for other people. They thought because I was sitting there, I was just like a passerby. And because someone else called in.
You shouldn't be walking around. Right,
exactly. And they were like, where's the driver of the car? And I said, you're looking at him. He's like, you were driving? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, where's your passengers? I said, there wasn't any passengers. It was just me. And so they strapped me to a board. In this meantime, I did call my wife and let her know. So they strapped me to this board. They've got my arms tucked in, the neck brace around my head. I mean, I look like I'm paralyzed the way they had me secured to this board. And that happened to be when she was pulling up to the scene. So to her, it looked like it was really bad.
Yeah.
And so I went to the hospital, I got checked out, and the doctor come up and he was like, I don't know who you pray to or what your religious affiliation is. He said, but I'd keep doing it. He said, by all intents and purposes, you're fine.
Wow.
And so broken bone wise, I was fine. Now it did mess my back up a little bit. My L4, L5 and S1 were really, really bothered by this. I still get care to this day for it. And that kind of started I guess kind of a downward spiral, if you will. I was out of work for a period of time. I lost the position that I had at the company. I didn't lose my job, but I lost the position that I held. So I had.
So do you think, Wade, that was just in losing your position? Was that because you were out because of your back? Okay.
Yeah. After you're out 90 days, they have the right to post your job. Yeah. My job was a rather important one, so nobody really wants to try to work overtime until you get back. They didn't know how long it was going to take. Yeah. And they posted it.
Okay.
And so when I coming back, I had to take another position that I wasn't really keen on. It was a little bit less money. So obviously that's not great either.
Yeah.
But I did still have a job. And so we're moving forward a little bit. And, when a man kind of loses, anytime that I didn't lose my job, but, the money was significant. I think men in general, when they start doing that, they start to feel down on themselves.
Sure.
They're not bringing as much to the table.
Feel like you got demoted. Yeah.
Yeah. And it started some problems and me and my wife were arguing a good bit, and mostly about that. Cause I'm irritated, I'm ill. So, everybody knows when you're that way, you take it out on the ones you love, the ones around you. And, I had a friend that I'd met in the neighborhood. I'd only known the guy for a couple of months, and we became pretty close. I mean, he was a very nice dude. Anytime we would hang out, he would say, yeah, come over, bring a side, whatever. We'll hang out right by the pool. And we done that. And then one particular night, my wife was at another neighbor's house. Now this neighbor is significant to the story because he was involved in it.
Okay.
So we were at his house, and then we're all sitting in his garage and we hear the scream. Well, we kind of was like, we knew that wasn't a scream like kids play, and it's 12:30. Like, all right, something's going on. So we go running down the street to where we were hearing the screams. And I had just left this house across the street where these other people were at, like probably 20 minutes before this. Mm-hmm. So after I had left, apparently they went home, had an argument, and the guy pulled out a gun and committed suicide right there.
Wow. Did you know this guy?
Yeah, yeah, that's the guy I was saying that I
That's the
kind
guy
of
you're
known a
talking
couple of
about.
months. Yeah. So, like I said, I mean, hadn't known him all my life, but in the couple of months that I did know
Pretty
him,
close
we
to
became
him.
real
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
And so we go up and I see this woman like rolling on the ground and I go up to her and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I didn't even know it was them because when I had left them, they were at another party, another house.
Hmm.
And I realized it was her. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, he shot himself. And I was like, who? She said her husband's name. So we go in the house and man, I tell you, it was the worst thing I'd ever seen. I mean, just awful. And
Never
it
seen
just,
anything like that. Right.
no, never, not I still haven't. Even my
Mm.
situation wasn't even as bad
Yeah.
as this. And so seeing that visually, having somebody that, like I said, it's, I don't want to diminish it. I felt like he was a good friend of mine, even though we had only known each other a short period of time. But I mean, any way you could say that you wanted your life to be set a certain way when you were, his age. He had a wife, he had 2
Hmm.
kids. One was fixing to be married, the other one was in middle school, had a Mercedes, a work truck, a Harley,
Hmm.
golf cart, boat. He had all the things that you would say, okay, if you just want to
Seemed
say,
okay.
I want.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's a lot of the times the people that are suffering the most. And
Right.
he did that. So that compiled with everything else really kind of sent me in a tailspin. And
Hmm.
it was more,
You already weren't in a great place.
yeah, already. And it was more my doing. I told my wife that I thought we should separate. We were fighting a lot, and I was just like, maybe it'd be better if we just separate. I was like, I'm not in a good place. We're fighting in
Hmm.
front of the kids. It's just not good. And I was like, I said, I'll leave. I said,
Hmm.
I'll continue to pay all the bills. But if you meet somebody, then we'll have to reassess the situation because I don't really feel like I should be paying for another dude sitting up on my
Oh,
couch
your
watching,
TV and the
yeah, watching
Netflix.
ESPN and shit. Don't want to do all that. And so we were apart. I think we split apart in like July of 2017.
Hmm.
August, September, October, she tells me that she did meet someone and that it could be getting serious. She's still kind of assessing the situation. And we're cordial, but we're not like buddy buddy either. We have kids,
Hmm.
we have to figure out what we're going to do with that. And she told me that, they were getting pretty serious. And I'm like, all right, well, remember the deal. If you're going to get serious, then, you got to go and I'll move back in. And so
Did you
that's,
know the guy at all?
I did not know him. I'd
Okay.
never met him. He had recent, we'll get more into this later, but he was a former, I want to say he was former Army.
Yeah.
And he had a issue that we'll kind of get into in a little bit where he had some severe PTSD and he
Hmm.
had spent some time in a medical facility for that, like a psych facility. And
Yeah.
he recently gotten out and he moved to Charleston for a fresh start and coincidentally happened to meet with my wife. So
Meet your wife.
it
Okay.
was nobody that we knew, nobody from, an inner circle, no,
Right.
just a chance meeting that kind of put all this into play. And so the October the 31st, Halloween, was the last night that she moved in. We took our son trick or treating, or last night she stayed, rather. She moved out November the 1st. And really from November until December, like mid December, we didn't talk. She was doing her thing, I was
Hmm.
doing mine. And I didn't mind that she moved in with that guy. The reason being, we were going to be able to fast forward that divorce for 90 days. We were going to be able to get a quick divorce because she was living with him. We had already agreed on the terms of what I was going to give her for my
Hmm.
retirement, what our, the child support situation would be, what the
Hmm.
visiting arrangements would be. We already had all that done.
Okay.
And so, with her living with the guy, obviously that's technically adultery. Even though I knew about it, it wasn't behind my back. And it was just going to fast forward everything. So we were okay with it. I was seeing other people too. I didn't have anybody living with me, but I was seeing other people as well. And about mid-December, we were just kind of talking about what we are going to do for Christmas. And I was like, so how's things going your way? And not too great, found out this and this. And I was just kind of joking. I'm like, yeah, so it's always good in the beginning, ain't it? I was like, then when you live with somebody,
Yeah.
stuff changes
Honeymoon worn off.
quick.
Right.
Yeah, the honeymoon wore off, honeymoon phase. And, we just kind of started like joking around for really the first time since we had kind of split up. And you could tell there was still a little something there, a
Mhm.
little spark. And we met, I think, out for lunch one time. Now, the key part to the story here is, we start seeing each other a little bit more. And I actually go back out of work because of my back issues.
Okay.
Out for a little while. I'm doing physical therapy. So we kind of talked off and on through January, through February. and through March. We weren't sure if either one of us wanted to do it again. We obviously knew there was a past and a history, so there was feelings there, but we both weren't sure if we were going to, reignite this thing.
Did you feel like at that time, Wade, that you were coming out of the depression and the stuff that you were going through? Or were you feeling better about your world?
I was feeling a little bit better. I had gotten a different position at the place that I was working at Nucor. It was a little bit better. I was around people that I knew, so it made going to work not quite as difficult. And two, I really think I just needed a break. Like, I don't think anyone desires to be alone 24/7, but sometimes having a little break and being by yourself and being able to deal with your thoughts is not a bad thing. And, I got that. And then it started Christmas, and that's, a time for family. And, you start realizing too what you miss. You might not realize what you're missing until it's gone.
Right.
And a lot of those things were kind of coming into play. And we were both, like I said, under the assumption of, hey, we know there's still something here, but we don't know if it's something that we can make work. We've tried it a couple times, and, we've always kind of wound up on a page where, maybe it's best we split. So it was still edgy waters for both of us. And then we decided to go to her mom's for Easter weekend, which was in April. And I had just had a procedure done on my back, and I can't remember the name of it. It's a very long name. And it's like where they go in and they burn the nerve endings off of your spine. And what that does, it does. It's not a pleasant feeling, but what it does is it alleviates the pain. So like when you bend over or whatever, it doesn't have that shooting pain that goes up and down your back. Now these nerves, they reattach themselves, but it takes about 6-8 months. So really you do this twice a year, and it kind of minimizes your pain and lets you lead somewhat of a normal life. This was the first time I'd had it done, so I was quite sore after this. And we go to her mom's for Easter, and we kind of decide up there, hey, we're going to give this another go. And we had already been to divorce court. It was time for us to go to court. We were going to go ahead and go forward with it. And I'm like, here's what I think we should do. And we both agreed. We're going to get divorced. We're going to get the divorce. I'm going to give you what I said I was going to give you. If we decide we want to make this work, we'll get remarried. We'll have a fresh start. You'll still have what I gave you if you decide, hey, this isn't what I want. And then you can go your way and I can go mine. So that's kind of what we were going to do. I was like, if we decide we'll give it another go, it'll be a fresh start, whole new start. And so we were there for Easter weekend. We went to the beach for 2 or 3 days. Now, during this time period, her and the guy was living with her in the beginning from November until I think mid-January. Then the guy moved out. They were still seeing each other, but he wasn't living there.
Okay.
Well, when it came to the time that we were going to try us again, I told her, I was like, all right, well, obviously you got to tell him, you're going to come back to me. I'll tell the chick I'm seeing that, I'm going to go back to you. Obviously mine didn't really care too much because she was okay. It is what it is.
Right.
Well, we come back on Friday, and I was like, we'll let him know, and I'll try to work on getting you moved in Saturday. And my son had a soccer game that Saturday morning. So I see her at the soccer game the next morning. I didn't want to call her and, be calling in the middle of it. So I just said, well, I'll see her in the morning. And she said, I didn't really get a chance to talk to him. She said, he come in, he went straight to sleep. And, I didn't get a chance to even bring it up. He said he wasn't feeling well. I'm going to do it today. And so I was like, all right. Well, about 4:00, she calls me and she's like, well, I gave him the news and he didn't take it very well. She said, he's gone right now. And she's like, but I know he's not gone for good because he left his dog here. He had a service dog.
Okay.
And I was like, well, what are you going to do? And she's like, I don't know. I'm fixing to come over here or come over there, meaning my house.
Your place.
Now where we live at is it's one big community. And then there's different subdivisions in that community. So I lived in one closer to the front. She lived like one subdivision back. So different neighborhood, but drive time, we're talking
not very far apart.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay.
And so she comes over and we're kind of talking, kind of getting the bearings on what we're going to do. And I'm like, well, where do you think he went? And she's like, I'm not sure. And I said, well, if he rides by here and sees your car here, it could cause something. And she was like, well, you're right. She's like, I'm going to go back home in case he comes back and starts showing out. I might get a bag together and then I'll come over here tonight. Okay. And I said, okay, we'll go with that. And she goes back. And the last time I hear from her, she said, he come back, but he said he's going to leave. And I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I never heard anything else from her for a little while. Now I'm at a friend's house in the neighborhood, also probably like 2 minutes from my house. And the neighbor whose home I mentioned that we were at earlier when the guy committed suicide, when we run down there, he
Mhm.
calls me and he knows a little bit about what's going on. He knows that, we've been seeing each other. I think I did tell him that I thought we were going to get back together. He obviously knew about the other guy. He's known about the situation kind of from the beginning. He's my friend.
Mhm.
And so he's like, hey, he's like, I'm not sure what's going on. He said, but your wife just rode by here. And she said, he said, Liam was in the car with her. And he said, I walked up. He said, they pulled up in front of the house, but nobody got out. And he said, so since nobody got out, I walked up and he was like, hey guys, what's going on? And so the guy was sitting in the passenger seat and said, oh, we're looking for, I think the term he used was fuckhead, but he was like, we're looking for fuckhead because when I find him, I'm going to kill him.
Oh, the
And
guy said he's going to kill you.
yeah, he told him there, he's like, when I find him, I'm going to kill him. And so he was like, hey, what's going on? Let's not talk like that. Whatever he said, he was trying to diffuse the situation.
Yeah, calm it down.
He did stay. What he said, I'm going to get her to take me home and I'll come back here. So he went home and then he drove back to that house. Well, in between the time.
Wait, let me ask you something real quick.
Yeah,
did when he was this guy, and he has animosity towards you, had you guys ever even met? Like,
we did meet one time. I knew who he was. I mean, obviously everybody's going to, Facebook investigate,
sure.
their own.
Yeah.
And when I found out who he was, I Googled his or Facebooked him and, just looked at his Facebook profile the best I could. And, so I knew what he was. I knew who he was and I knew what he looked like. And we actually met probably about, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 months around December. After he had, gotten involved with my wife and we met at a gas pump and I was pumping gas. He pulled up beside me, he got out, we kind of locked eyes. And he was like, you know who I am? And I said, yeah. I said, I'll take it. You know who I am? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, weird situation, ain't it? And I said, not for me. I was like, I said, you're the one that's got to deal with this problem now. I was joking around. I was like, you're the one that's going to have to deal with all this. And he kind of laughed and we left it at that.
So it's pretty cordial.
Yeah, it was cordial. I didn't blame this dude, man. I didn't have animosity to him. He didn't sneak in. He didn't break up a marriage. He didn't, do anything wrong. I told my wife very blatantly if she wanted to go find someone else, she was more than free. That was her call. And if I would have been in his shoes, I would have done the same exact thing. My wife's very attractive. If I'd have seen an attractive woman that said, hey, I'm going through a divorce, and I would have done the same thing. So I didn't have any beef with this guy.
Right.
I didn't necessarily want to be his friend, but I didn't have any beef with him either.
Right.
So when that happened, and he said that, he's going back to their home and like the community behind mine. And in between the time when he left there to come back, that guy called me on the phone and he's like, hey, if you ride by here and you see Liam's car here, he said, don't stop. And I was just like,
not good.
why? And he was like, well, he's like, something's going on. I'm not sure what it was, but I'm not sure what it is, but I know he's pissed. He said, but he's coming back here and I'm going to try to figure out what's going on. And I said, well, I'm pretty sure I know what's going on and why he's upset, but yeah, I got you. I won't stop. Now, he didn't tell me that he said that. He didn't tell me that he told me he was going to kill me. He just said something was wrong and he was going to try to figure out what it was.
Okay.
I already knew. I figured he got the news and he was pissed.
Mad.
What he was doing was making my wife ride around to look for me, to confront me, to see if we had been seeing each other before he got this news.
Okay.
So I know he's over there. I go back to my home. I'm trying to get in touch with my wife at this point, and she's not answering her phone. It's going straight to voicemail. Finally, after about 11 o'clock, my daughter worked at a Mexican restaurant in the neighborhood. She gets off. She goes home. My wife calls me from her phone, and she's like, hey, she said it got pretty bad. He said he was going to leave. Then he started getting upset, saying that, I was seeing you, before I told him, and he smashed my phone, headbutted her, like threw her up against a wall, punched a hole in the wall, was breaking stuff in the house.
It got pretty violent then.
Yeah, it got pretty violent. And then he made her get in the car to ride around and look for me, which at that point, that's when they pulled up to the neighbor's house.
Got it. Okay.
I'm like, well, what are you going to do? She said, well, as far as I know, he's staying at Jamie's. And I was like, well, all right. I guess if you feel comfortable there, it is what it is. If he's going to stay at Jamie's, I still didn't know exactly what was going on over there, but at that point, I was just letting him handle it. It wasn't really my business. I wasn't called into it. So I go back home. I'm in bed. This is probably like 12:30 at night. I was watching a UFC fight on TV. And I remember it really vividly because it was like a fight right after Conor McGregor like attacked that bus and threw the dolly through the bus window. And they were showing that. And I get a text and it's from the guy. And I knew his number. He had texted me, or I think my wife had texted me from his phone one time before when we were talking about where we were going to meet to, exchange my son. So I had his number logged in. I knew it was him. And he's like, "Hey, are you awake?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm awake." And he said, "Would you mind meeting up to talk?" And I'm kind of half playing dumb, but I'm like, "About what?" And he's like, "Well," he said, "I think I'm being lied to." And he said, "I feel like you'll tell me the truth." And he said, "I just want some answers." He said, "I'm not trying to fight." He said, "I don't want no drama." He said, "If you're more comfortable, we can meet at your friend Jamie's house," which was the guy's house he had been at, previously.
Earlier.
And I was like,
What,
"Okay."
what time of night was it when you were
This is
talking
probably
to him?
about 12:30.
Okay. So it's late.
Yeah, it was late. And so I get in the car. I called my daughter's phone back and my wife answered and she's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "Well, he wants to talk." Now, see what had happened here previously is he left Jamie's house with the agreement that he was going to go home, get his stuff, and go to a hotel. Well, he didn't do that. He went back home and started causing more stuff. Somebody there called Jamie and said, "I thought he was staying with you. He's back down here showing his ass." So Jamie goes to the house. He says, "Hey, you got to come. You told me you were going to leave. You got to come with me." He said, "I'll come with you if you let me call Chip and we talk," or Wade. Some people call me Chip, but my name's Wade.
We'll call you Chip Wade / Wade. Yeah. Chip Williamson Wade and then Hollywood Wade. Yeah.
He said, "If you let me call him and get some answers," he said, "I'll go back with you." And he was like, "All right." So when he called me, or when he was texting me that, he was actually in the car with my buddy and they were driving back to his house.
Okay.
We pull up, I pull up, they pull up about the same time. And, basically that's what it was. He was wanting to know, had we been seeing each other prior to him getting the news? And I just told him flat out, I was like, "Look, man," I was like, "at the end of the day, that's still my wife. So it's really none of your damn business." I was like, "But to answer your question, no." I said, "We recently decided that there was still something there." I was like, "We're going to give it another shot. And it's really nothing, you have to say over the matter." I was like, "We're still married. At the end of the day, we're still husband and wife. So it is what it is." And it got a little heated there for a minute. Never went to blows. I mean, he was obviously frustrated. He was ticked off that he was getting the boot. He had no family in the immediate area. So I mean, I could tell he was a little aggravated, but after I think he knew that I wasn't going to give him what he wanted, he may have been wanting to bait me into a fight. I really don't know. I probably wouldn't have at that house just because my buddy was a pretty big dude. And I wouldn't have probably wanted to pick a fight there because obviously he was going to be on my side. But, whatever the case may be, it didn't go to violence or anything of that nature. And the conversation kind of shifted to really three dudes just hanging out in the garage. Everybody was kind of talking about different things. They were talking about their military careers. My buddy was a Coast Guard. That guy was Army. I've never served in the military, but it just wound up being just three dudes kind of shooting the shit in a garage.
So things had kind of shifted down gear.
Yeah. Very much so. Now I'd say probably this is like 3:30 in the morning. My friend, maybe 3:34. My friend Jamie, who lived there, he's like, "Man, I'm fixing to lay it down." And he was like, "Are you going to stay here?" And he was asking the guy, Liam, he said, "Are you going to stay here?" And he's like, "No, I'll get Chip to run me home." And he kind of looked at me and he's like, "Are you cool with that?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm cool with that." And he was like, "All right, well, you guys be good. I'll talk to y'all tomorrow." So he shuts the garage. We're walking to my car and he's like, "If I go home, we're just going to argue." And I was like, "You ain't got to tell me. I've argued with it for many years. I know it." And he was like, "If you're cool with it, man," he said, "we can just go back to your house." And I was a little apprehensive about it, but I was like, this has went in an entirely different direction. He seems pretty cool.
Yeah.
Get in my car, and the distance from my home to this guy's house is maybe 7 or 8 houses. The only reason I didn't walk down there was because it was a little chilly.
Okay.
And so we get in the car and he proceeds to start telling me the story about that was hooked to he had a bracelet on his wrist. And I don't know if this was in kind of contrast to the story about the guy that he committed suicide, because that actually came up in the garage, that whole story,
Mhm.
And he's like, do you know why I wear this bracelet? And I was like, dude, I don't know nothing about you. I was like, I don't know
Mhm.
why you wear that bracelet. I said, the only thing I really know about you is your name and that you were in the Army. And he tells me this story about how he was in service and his friend got shot in the head and he was trying to save him. And, the Army said he didn't do something right. And so that's why he got kicked out. And that gave him PTSD. And that's kind of why he's in the situation he's in now. And while he's telling me this story, he starts to cry. And I
Mm.
mean, grown man sitting in my car, my front seat, and I see tears rolling down his face when
What do
he's
you
telling me
think?
the story. I didn't know what to think. I mean, obviously he was emotional. Come to find out, the story was partially true, but it was fabricated to a degree. He wasn't act make sure I word this right. He wasn't in combat. He was intelligence. So he was somewhere else giving intel to the people that was out on the front lines, I guess, if you will. I'm
Mhm.
not well versed in military lingo, so if I don't say the right thing, forgive me. But basically, he was somebody in a computer telling them, "Hey, go here, go there, go here." He gave the guy bad intel, which led him into a
You get
situation where
shot.
he did get shot.
Yeah.
So obviously, even though that still had to bother him, I'm sure it did. He probably felt responsible, I'm sure. And so he's telling me this story, and we're kind of sitting there in the car, and he's like, he's like, I know this is a weird situation. He was like, but he's like, I was at a real low time in my life when, I met your wife, and he said she, kind of brought me out of a depression. I was like, well, I said, I can understand that, man. I said, it's a shitty situation. It really isn't no way around it. And so at that point, we're sitting in my driveway because it didn't take but just a second to get there.
Yeah.
And so we go in my house and we're in there probably at least an hour, hour and a half. Now he was a smoker. So he had to go outside. I didn't smoke in my house. So you had my camera or ring doorbells, or it wasn't ring at the time. I forgot what it was, but it was security cameras. And you seen like the back door open, then the front door open. We would walk out the front, walk out the back for him to smoke. We're in there just talking about everything. We're talking about random stuff. We're talking about, how I redecorated the house. I was like, when we separated, I said, I redone everything in here, just to try to change it up where it didn't like, dredge up memories. And, we got on the subject of tattoos. And I kind of pulled down my shirt and I was showing him one of the most recent ones I had. And I pointed to the one on my chest. Well, when I did that, and I don't know if you can see it here, but
Yeah. Scar.
scar is an open heart surgery scar.
Yeah.
And so he sees that and he's like, man, what happened there? And I said, I had open heart surgery in 2001. What it was, I was born with what was called a VSD, which is a small hole in the heart.
Yeah. My wife has that.
Oh, okay. So it really didn't limit me to anything. I would have to take certain medications before I went to the dentist, things like that.
Yeah.
But in 2001, my senior year in high school, they figured out that the hole was a little bit bigger than what they thought. And they thought it would be better to go ahead and get it patched, especially since I was still up under my mom's insurance. I was about to be
Mhm.
on my own. And he's
Right.
like, better to do it now than, when you're 50 and can't recuperate.
Yeah.
So my senior year in high school, I had that done. So he notices that scar. I tell him kind of the story and he pulls up my shirt from the bottom up
That's
to
kind of odd.
yeah, well, he was doing it to see the whole scar because I was like, I
Yeah.
said, yeah, I had open heart surgery in 2001. So he pulls up my shirt and he sees it. Now, when he does this, there's no way he can't see that I'm carrying the gun on my hip.
Okay.
Now, a little bit of background about me and guns, because a lot of people say, oh, well, it's mighty funny you had a gun, when you were going to see them. I was like, look, I had a gun if I was going to see a postman. Like, it doesn't matter. Since I was 18 years old, I've owned guns. I
Mhm.
had a CWP probably 2 years prior to this, way before any of this stuff happened. That particular gun that I had on me, I had been pulled over by law enforcement with the numbers on that gun ran. So it was documented that that would be the gun that I would be carrying.
Mhm.
So all that was not out of the norm, regardless of what people may want to spin it. And he either didn't see it. I don't know how he didn't see it, but if he did see it, he didn't acknowledge it. He
Okay.
put the shirt back down.
No discussion about it.
No discussion about it, didn't mention it or nothing. He puts my shirt back down and he's like, man, he said, under different circumstances, he said, you and I would have probably been like great friends. And he kind of comes in and does like one of those bear hug type deals, especially when guys that have had a drink or two, they'll
Yeah.
kind of bear hug you, pick you up, but then put you right back down.
Mhm.
He done that. I found that to be a little odd, but at the same time, I didn't know how this guy's alcohol was. I didn't know how many beers he had drank. He drank a couple of beers at that garage. Once we got to my house, I think he and I did share a shot, maybe one, maybe two. But he didn't appear like very inebriated to me. But I've seen that kind of thing from people before, just that bro hug, I guess they call it.
Yeah.
When he sits me down, he's like, "Where's your bathroom at?" And I point him down the hall to the bathroom. So he goes, and at this point, I still haven't made contact with my wife in hours. She doesn't really know what's going on. Last she knows is that we were going.
I'd be asleep.
Yeah. And I texted her and I was like, "Hey, are you awake?" She responded back. She's like, "Yeah, what the hell's going on?" And I was like, "Everything's good. We're at my house. Everything's good." And I'm sitting there up against my stove. Now, to kind of give you a layout of my kitchen, you have a hallway from the bathroom that comes up. After that, your refrigerator is immediately to your right once you end that wall to get into the kitchen. Then you have a little bit of counter space, and then it curves back around. You got a stove, another little bit of counter space, curves back the other way with a sink. So not a very big, broad area. I'm up against the stove, just kind of sitting there. That's where the drinks and everything were in that general area. He comes around the corner. He doesn't say a word. He comes straight up to me and bam, left arm up under my chin, pushing me. It wasn't really choking me so much. It was pushing me back, like pushing my head back so much.
It wasn't like a chokehold. He was pushing your neck.
Yeah, kind of using it to control me, basically. He was pushing up, not back. Yeah. And so I actually go off my feet. Like at this point, I'm sitting on the stove and I'm just like, what the hell's going on? And he's like, he looks me dead in my eye. And I remember this to the day I die. I remember looking into his eyes and I didn't see a color. His eyes looked white. And he says, "I'm going to fucking kill you." Those are the exact words. Am I okay to swear on this?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
We are explicit on Nightmare Success.
So,
but he just comes out and says, "I'm going to fucking kill you."
Yeah, straight up, hands up.
I mean, some kind of switch happened when he goes to the bathroom and he's after you full on.
Well, looking back in retrospect, what I think that pickup was to kind of test and see, all right, can I pick this guy up? Can I maneuver? Can I see if I can have my way with him? Looking back now, I think that's
that's the last thing he did before he went to the restroom.
Yes, the very last thing he did. So looking back now, it kind of seems like maybe this was a setup to try to get me to maybe drop my guard and then try to do what he was going to do. So he says that, and I'm like, I'm trying to get off of the stove. I was able to slide off of the stove. He comes up with his knee to try to like knee me in my side. I kind of turned my body a little bit. So I kind of ducked that. And I told him, I was like, "Dude, if you don't get the fuck off me, I'm going to shoot you." He cocks back with his right hand. He's already coming back. He's still holding me up under the chin. I see it coming. So I try to move back a little bit to duck it. And he still clips the bottom of my chin. He doesn't hit me flush upside the face. He clips the bottom of my chin with his knuckles. Well, he's holding me with his left hand. So when his right comes across, it makes him break that hold because his force is coming across over the top of it. And he kind of stumbles like over a foot or two. At this point, I step like one step back. I'm up against my counter. I'm literally in the corner. He's already turning back to come back at me. So I drew out my gun and I shot. I thought it was 2 times. Turns out later it was actually 3. It was real quick. It was real loud. I never fired a gun in a house before like that. I mean, anytime I've ever fired a gun, it's either been outdoors or in a range. But I mean, it was so damn loud. It made my ears ring. He immediately dropped and I was just like, kind of rubbing my eyes. I was like, "Oh shit, what the fuck?"
Yeah.
Grabbed the phone. I called 911 and I just told him, I was like, "Look, this was a thing that kept coming up. The 911 call. I said in the beginning, I said, I had a friend of mine in my house. He came at me. He hit me. He said he was going to kill me. I had no choice. I had to shoot him." By me saying that I had a friend of mine in my house, that got ripped apart and looked at under different eyes. I didn't know what else to say. I couldn't tell the 911. All right, well, let me explain to you the situation before I take
right. You just shot somebody.
Yeah. I mean, I just didn't know what to say. I was panicking.
I'm sure the adrenaline rush was absolutely off the charts.
It was through the fucking roof. And so, I mean, but that was just the first thing that come out of my mouth. And
the other thing, Wade, that I don't want to roll over here is because there's been a lot of talk in the world that we live in right now about guns and police officers and like why are they using it? When somebody comes at you and they're well, first of all, his intent was to kill you in your own home. Uh, if he grabs that gun, he kills you with that gun.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when those police officers, they get into these situations, and they say, why do you just wrestle them down there? Well, you wrestle somebody on the ground and you have a gun on your hip. That means that you can die with your own gun.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you were in a really weird situation in a very small corner of your kitchen with somebody who had flipped the switch.
And not to mention, this dude was not a small individual.
Right.
And we'll get into later, he had actually started doing cycles of steroids, which he took that night. He took a cycle of, they found 2 vials in a trash can at my wife's residence. So you looking at now, he's taking steroids. He's on prescription pills because he had PTSD. And it was later found out that he was 3 times the legal limit in alcohol. That all come back in the autopsy.
Did you know he was dead? Like when you called, like, did you know what was going on?
Well, I mean, I knew what was going on in the sense that he was shot. Now he was making noises. I think if you listen to the show that I did on Concrete, they actually played portions of that call.
Of that segment.
So you could hear him making noises in the background. Now he was not talking. He never spoke.
Yeah.
But these were just, I mean, I guess the only way I can.
How long did it take how long, like when you called to when the police showed up, like was it a long time or were they there with like quickly?
The police showed up, I'd say probably in about 9 or 10 minutes. The phone conversation was like right at 10 minutes long.
Okay.
And now this time in the morning is probably like right at 6 o'clock. It's between 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. So not a lot of traffic on the road. I've seen the cam footage from the time the officer got the call. There's not a lot of traffic. It's Sunday morning. He was able to hammer down and get there pretty quick. During the phone call, the 911 operator told me, she was like, she was asking me questions. She's like, how many times was he shot? I told her twice. She said, is he breathing? I said, well, he's making noises. She told me to go get a towel, put it over the wounds. When I pulled up his shirt, I only seen 2 entrance holes, which kind of reconfirmed that it was twice. There was another one. I didn't pull the shirt up quite far enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I leave the shirt on there. I even tell the 911 operator, I was like, look, I don't know what I'm doing. I said, I've got it on here, but I don't know what I'm doing. And, finally the cop got there. She told me to go outside, surrender to the cop. I did. He immediately placed me in handcuffs and he said, you're not under arrest. He said, we're just doing this to assess the situation.
Okay.
I was like, all right. I told him where he was at, told him the gun was on the counter. And at that point, he did place me in cuffs. Another car pulled up probably within a minute of him. And that particular vehicle, they put me in the back of. Now, at this point, I'm in the back of the vehicle. Don't really know what's going on. I'd say probably 5 or 6, 7 minutes after that, an ambulance pulls up to the house. And then everybody else starts to follow in. So you got deputies, you got SUVs, you got fire, EMS, SUV vehicles. I mean, they're lining the street. And by now it's, 6:37. People are starting to get up and get
neighbors everywhere. Right.
And man, I'm telling you, my neighborhood's like, if you go outside in your yard and you fall down, you're already in the neighbor's yard. So it's real close together, close proximity. So I see blinds opening. People are riding by on golf carts, trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Cause nothing like this had ever happened in this. And I'm still sitting in the car. Can't really do anything. A couple of guys are like looking at me through in the window, going like that. And, I can't talk to them. I'm in the car. They can't hear me. And it seemed like forever, but I'd say probably maybe 45, 50 minutes, close to an hour. The female cop that was the second to arrive comes back over. And at that point, she reads me my rights. She's like, you're being placed under arrest. She gives me the whole, Miranda rights thing. And she said, do you want to answer any questions? And I said, no, not without a lawyer. And she was like, okay. Then she walks away. And
what are you thinking? What are you thinking at that time, Wade?
I'm still thinking that there's no way I'm going to get in trouble for this. I'm thinking I was in my own house. That's my gun. That's not an illegal gun. I was licensed to carry that gun anywhere, but definitely in my own home. He came to me. He said he was going to kill me. I just had back surgery. I wasn't able to try to fight this guy off. Everything is there for them to see. If they start investigating the story, he was just getting the boot. That's probably why he was pissed. I'm thinking They're going to do their job and they're going to see this and everything's going to be okay. I'm still thinking in my mind, there's no reason I should be worried. Well, I'm in the car, probably another 2 hours on top of this. Now it's been a while and I got to use the bathroom. And there was, at that point, my wife had actually come up. I seen her through the back window. There's probably 15 cops in the yard. I mean, it's chaos. And I finally motioned to one of the cops. I was like, man, I got to use the bathroom. And he's like, you're going to have to hold it. And I'm like, that ain't an option. There's, I'm going to go. It's either going to be in this car or you can let me in that house or something. But like, I'm going now. And he's like, hold on. So he walks over, he comes back, he lets me out. We go into the front door and he said, this is your house? I said, yeah, this is my house. I live here. And so he lets me go to the bathroom. I come out and he said, we got to collect your clothes. He said, can you take us to your closet? We need to get off everything that you got. And he said, then we'll go from there. So we go upstairs, we go to my closet. They take my boots, my pants, my shirt. I think pretty much everything I had on,
everything had on,
socks and underwear. They let me keep those.
Okay.
And so I get redressed and I come back downstairs. I think they took some pictures of me. And then one of the detectives that was there, he said, is there somewhere you can go while we finish our investigation? So in my mind, I'm like, all right, well, maybe they're already getting piecing shit together. Cause a minute ago, an hour ago, I was arrested. Now he's asking me if there's somewhere I can go till they finish.
Right.
I said, yeah. I was like, I see my buddy out there on a golf cart. I said, he lives around the corner at, whatever the address. I said, I can go there. And he's like, all right. He said, I'll come there when we're done. So I come out. By this time, my mom has already been called. She lived about 2.5 hours away. She's there. It's like I said, it's chaos, but I go see her and I'm like, hey, drive me around the corner to, this guy's house. I tell him, go to your house. I'll be over there in a second. So we go over there. My mind's still, going 100 miles an hour. Adrenaline's still pumping. I'm trying to kind of piece together what's going on. I'm telling them what happened. Nobody knew anything about what had happened. They just got the call that, after the fact. So I'm trying to clue them in. I'd say probably 45 minutes after that, SUV cop comes pulling up. I go up to the window and he's like, are you ready to come to the station and answer some questions? I was like, I already told the lady. I was like, I'll come, but I'm not coming without a lawyer. And he said, who's your lawyer? At the time, I didn't have a lawyer. I had the guy who I was using for my divorce, which was a former cop. Yeah. So he knew, and he's like, well, I know him. He's like, he used to be one of us. He said, I'll call his office tomorrow morning and we'll set up a time for you to come in. Okay. I was like, all right, that works for me. I said, so I can go back home? And he said, yeah. And I asked him, I said, well, what about, the mess? I said, is there anything to clean up? And he said, that's not our problem. He said, we don't handle that. I was like, all right. And actually that's true. He said it in a pretty brash, smart ass way, but that actually is true. If something happens in your home, that's not their responsibility to clean up. They do their investigation. And
then they're out.
And then they're out. You have to hire a cleaning crew or do it yourself or whatever you see fit, but it isn't their responsibility to clean up. So happens this particular whole incident, there was nothing. When we walked back in the kitchen, where the gentleman,
do you know he's dead at this time?
I did not get word that he was dead at that time. The last word that I got was that he was at the hospital and they gave him a 1% chance of living.
Okay.
So I knew that his odds obviously wasn't very good, but I had not got a word yet by then that he was dead.
Okay.
Where he was laying out in the kitchen, there was like a little bit of smeared blood on the hardwood floors. And when I say a little bit, I'm talking to the extent my mom got a napkin, she wet it, and she wiped it all up, and it was gone with one swipe of one napkin. That was the extent of the blood.
Not a lot of blood.
Not a lot of blood. What had happened, these were full metal jacket rounds. These weren't hollow point bullets. So it was, everything was through and through except for one. One stayed inside. Two of them went through. Now, these are key factors here. One of them went through him, struck my refrigerator, which was, as I said, remember, if you coming down the hall and you step into the kitchen, your refrigerator is immediately to your right. So the only way for you to strike a refrigerator is you've got to be across from it, somewhat aiming at it, which put me directly in the corner where I said I was. It actually nicked the handle, hit the door, and ricocheted and hit the wall. The other bullet hit to the side of the refrigerator. It was a 24-pack of, I think, like Aquafina water sitting there. It went through about 3 bottles of water and landed in the bottom of it. They never found that.
Wow.
I found that.
Okay.
They never even found that bullet. So we get there. We're kind of still, mine's still kind of racing. I do get the word that he passed away. So at this point, I call the lawyer. I kind of tell him what's going on. He's like, be at my office at, 8:00 tomorrow morning. So didn't really sleep much that night. Adrenaline was still kind of wide open.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, we start moving everything because the whole, I guess, mission to this was to start getting my wife moved in anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So this very quickly kind of sped up this process to get everything from that house back over to our house, try to give some stability to my kids, because obviously my son didn't really know exactly what was going on. He obviously knew there was a lot of people there. He's probably 8 years old at the time. My daughter comprehended what was going on. So we were trying to get them back in the house that they knew they were comfortable in. So
Is
that's
this all on the news and stuff, Wade?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all over the news. News cameras were camped out of the house for 2 and 3 days, just waiting and like recording and
Would have been
reporting.
crazy for the family.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, just walking out, seeing news people. And I mean, like I said, nothing that I know of had ever happened. We had some incidences here and there, but nothing to this extent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I meet up with the lawyer the next morning, and he's like, I want you to write me a statement exactly what happened. So actually, he told me that the night before. He said, I want you to write me up a statement and bring it with you tomorrow. So I come and I give him a statement, and he looks at it, and he calls the investigator, and he was like, send me all your questions and we'll answer them. So I guess they sent a list of questions, and then he sends it back, and he said, everything you want to know is in a statement. And I was like, so we're not going up there? And he's like, no, we ain't going up there. He's like, everything they wanted to know, they got answered in your statement. He's like, if they need anything else, they'll call me and I'll call you. And so I'm like, all right, well, if you say we're good, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
So I leave. This is Monday. Never heard anything Monday. Never heard anything Tuesday. Wednesday, he calls me about 3:30, 4:00 in the afternoon. I'm like, all right, this could be good or bad. I answer the phone, and he's like, hey, I got bad news. That's not what you want your lawyer to say as soon as you open up your telephone conversation. And I'm like, what is it? And he said, they're charging you with murder. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me. And he's like,
that's really bad news.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's bad doesn't even cover it. That's like news. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, they're charging you with murder. And I was like, why? And he was like, I don't know. He said, I asked him why. He said, all they said was they were charging you with murder and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. He said, the only thing I can figure is they're trying to spin this as like a love triangle thing, and you killed him to get your wife back. And I'm like, but dude, like, she was coming back anyway. Like,
why he was the odd man out.
Yeah. Why would I need to kill somebody who's no longer a factor? Like, it's not like I just found out about this. They had been together for months before. If it happened back in November, I might could see him, looking at me. I'm like, but this is, 6 months after the fact. And he's like, well, whatever the case, he said, they want you to turn yourself in tomorrow at 12:00. And I was like, all right, well, let me call you back. So I hang out with him. I start making calls to people that I know, telling them what's going on, what they're charging me with. And one name keeps popping up. He's like, call Andy, call Andy, call Andy. And this guy's name is Andy Savage. And he is the best crime. I mean, my money, best one ever, in the whole world.
I bet. Yeah.
But definitely in South Carolina, especially in the Charleston area, like, he's the guy you go to when you're being charged with something like this. He's the guys that cops go to when they're charged with stuff like this.
He's a known man.
Yeah, he's a known man. He's really expensive, but he's also really good, because the extent that he goes to prove what you're saying is beyond anything I'd ever seen. So I call him at this time. I think his office may have been closed. I leave a message, and I kind of tell him what's going on. His secretary calls, and she said, hey, be there at 7:00 tomorrow morning and kind of let Andy know what's going on. I'm like, all right, I'll be there. So we're there at his office, is downtown Charleston. I explain everything to him, and he's like, why are we here? And I'm like, I said, your guess is as good as mine. He said, it sounds like a clean shoot. He's like, I don't understand it. And he's like, is it an election year? Somebody running for office? What's going on? And I said, but I don't know. I said, all the thing I can tell you is what I'm telling you is the truth. And he said, well, that was my next statement. He said, if you're lying, he said, the people that I have that are going to go into this and investigate it, he said, they'll find out real quick. And he said, if you're lying, it's going to be found out. And I said, I'm telling you, I'm not lying. Everything is right on the board. I said, I'm uniquely in a position to where in this situation, I don't have to lie about a damn thing. I said, as a matter of fact, the truth is going to help me as opposed to hurt me. And he was like, all right, well, we'll start getting everything ready. He's like, but wait a minute. He said, let me see if I can get you putting yourself or turning yourself in pushed back. He got it pushed back to Friday. Come Friday, he actually got it pushed all the way to Sunday. So I've got a gap from Wednesday to Sunday when at that point I know I got to turn myself in. So we start getting character letters ready from people. During that initial visit, as we're telling, we start going more into the story. My wife starts going more into his story.
But you're not in jail.
No, I'm not in jail at this point.
I mean, you got until Sunday and you find out. Right.
Yeah, I got some free time. As my wife's kind of telling him stuff about him and his family and his past, they're printing off stuff. They're getting records. It was like something out of a movie. As quick as you could say something, they're getting records. Okay, yeah, he went to the military here. He was here. I mean, it was
kicking all that stuff out.
Yeah, it was kicking. It was just left and right stuff being printed, stories, and it was just unlike anything I'd ever seen. So we get everything prepped and ready. I've got to turn myself in at like 1:00 on Sunday evening. So Saturday, all my family comes down. They come to the house. You know, party's the wrong word because it definitely wasn't a fun party, but I think more or less of just a gathering of everybody.
Yeah, everybody getting together.
Yeah, hoping for the best.
It's a crisis. Yeah, I get it.
So we get together. The next Sunday, it was kind of like that scene. And if you ever seen Goodfellas, where he goes out and gets in the car and he's like, all right, take me to jail. And that's exactly what happened. My mom actually drove me to jail and dropped me off. And I went in getting booked in. I was told like they don't always give bond to murders.
No. In fact, I think it's probably more uncommon that they do.
Yeah, it's very uncommon.
Wade, before we get into you getting in jail, I'm going to take a break here and recognize our second sponsor of the show, which is it's AaronDuncan.net, but he's rebranding himself as Built for Battle. He's a full-service global communications agency. He's the guy that if you have a crisis, you're going to want to call him. They make bad news go away. They're known as the trauma surgeons of brand crises, corporate scandals, high-profile litigation, legal investigations, prosecutions, kind of stuff that we're talking about here. Aaron, what does he do? What does it include? It's crisis management, it's crisis communication, media relations, reputation management, positive public relations, prison consulting and coaching. If you need to get a hold for a private confidential consultation, this is the guy you need to talk to. If you want to email him, it's Aaron at IAMB4B.com. That's Built for Battle. Or you can text him at 636-236-5071. If you're in a crisis, if you've got a crisis, Built for Battle, Aaron Duncan, that's the man you need to talk to. Might have been good to have Aaron Duncan walking into jail with you there, Wade.
Yeah, it might have been. Because that was, man, I'd never been arrested before. No, speeding ticket was the worst thing on my record. And so I go in, I get fingerprinted, and, you know, they're doing all the normal stuff. I mean, the closest thing I'd have been locked up is just what I'd seen on TV.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm getting fingerprinted. I go in the holding cell. Now, I'd already been told, hey, a magistrate's not going to be able to do anything for your case. You're going to have to get seen by circuit court. Now, luckily, we caught a break because circuit court rotates from county to county. And so there's a lot of counties in this area. Just so happens circuit court was in Berkeley County that week.
Good news.
We caught a break with that. He's like, you'll get a court date Monday. And I'm like, all right, good. So the magistrate did call you. That's just protocol. They're going to call to go to the magistrate. We go in. It was me, this other kind of biker looking dude that he got picked up for a DUI and a young kid. We all go in there. My name's Williamson. So obviously I'm last. Now, this biker guy had been chatting me up the whole time we were sitting in there. And I've always just been told, keep yourself, don't say anything, mind your own business. And he's just steady. Yep. Talking. And I'm like, I'm not being rude. So I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting in there and the young kid had like a simple possession marijuana charge. He gets a PR bond. This guy was on a second DUI. He gave him like a $10,000 bond, something along those lines. Then he calls my name and he's like, you know, Mr. Williamson, you're charged with possession of a weapon during a violent crime, and the charge of murder. And I don't know if he said first degree, but he said charge of murder.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I can't give you bond for those. You'll have to get seen by the circuit court. when he says that, I sit back down and that biker scoots like to the other end of the bench. Like
He's not sitting by you and talking to you
like,
anymore.
damn that, I ain't saying nothing else to him. So they transfer us back to the holding and we're cuffed up, wrist to ankle, shackled up. And he was sitting beside me. He goes and he gets his built-in one blanket and pillow that they have that you sleep, kind of like a mock sleeping bag. He gets that and goes to like the other side of the cell.
Yeah.
So that's how that went. And
well, I got a question for you, Wade, too. While all this is going on and you've had, and then you had the gathering at the house before you went in, like, what is your wife's take on all this? Because not only did you guys get in a fight, but the guy that she's been with for a few months and you guys are getting back together and she's moving back in, but this guy's dead now.
mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm sure she understands what happened because she got attacked also.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, abuse in that situation, but like what's going through her head?
She was just as spun out over this whole thing as me. I mean, I think it was so much so fast. Like we didn't have time to deal with one thing before something else hit you. So like, I didn't even really have time to process of, wow, I've just been involved in a shooting. The man ultimately
just rapid fire. Yeah.
Before, all right, you're getting charged.
Yeah.
All right. Now you're getting charged. Now you got to get everything ready. You're
right.
going to turn yourself in a couple of days.
Then right. You get a new attorney, do all the things that you're doing. Yeah. It's just spinning. I get it.
Didn't really have time to even start processing one part of it before something else hit you in the face.
Right.
And that was kind of where we're at. Obviously, she's carried a lot of guilt for this. She blames herself. And I've tried to tell her, I'm like, look, people get together and break up all the time and reconcile later. I mean, look at what Ben Affleck and J-Lo now just got together. There was
years later. Right.
Yeah, years later. And when they got back together, Alex Rodriguez didn't go to Ben Affleck's house with a baseball bat.
No, and try to kill him. No.
Yeah, I was like, it happens all the time. I was like, he just happened to not be one that was okay with what was going to,
happen. Something flipped on him. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole thing was unfortunate. And like I said, my mind's spinning through all this. I'm sitting in jail, never been in jail before, never been arrested. And now I'm in here for not necessarily the worst crime, but definitely one of the worst charges. I mean, I think pedophilia is probably going to be the worst crime, but murder, obviously carrying, I think they were trying to go for life. And I'm waiting. We have court that Monday morning at 9:00. I'm in the room with a bunch of other guys that are waiting for court too. I'm in street clothes at this point. All these guys are in like prison uniforms. So they're kind of wondering why I'm in street clothes and all of them are in the prison uniforms. And one guy was like, you're the guy from Cane Bay, ain't you? And I was like, yeah, that's the neighborhood that I live in. And he was like, you must be in here he's like, family court. And I'm just like, yeah, something like that. And I didn't say nothing. I was saying
no reason to.
Yeah, no reason to. So I finally get seen. We go in this court. They take me in there. And obviously, the state's trying to say why I should stay in jail. My lawyer's trying to say why I should get out. And he's like, he's got a good job. He's had for 15 years. He's got a son. He's got a daughter. He's been a good, upstanding member of the community, never been in trouble. They're trying to paint me as, Charles Manson on the other side. And when it gets to the point to where the judge is going to make a ruling, I'd never heard this before in my life. She's like, okay. She's like, I've heard everything I need to hear. She's like, I'll make a ruling and let you know, and bangs the gavel. So I kind of cut to the lawyer and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And he's like, I guess that means she'll let us know. And they're already dragging me out. Like they got to get the next person in there. I'm getting drug out. And, I don't know what the hell's going on. My mind's flipping because I'd never heard that said before. I thought it was either bond granted or bond denied.
Right. Now we're going to go back in the other room and
like, I'll let you know. So I go back, they cuff me up again. I have to stay in that room and then, eventually get back to the cell. Now I don't want to even overshadow. I kind of jumped ahead on this, but like the walk from where you're being held to the courthouse is underground. That walkway is probably the most intimidating walkway you would ever walk in your life. Like it looks like a dungeon, like you're walking into hell. And it was just, going and coming was both just, it was mind blowing. And, all the worst thoughts run through your head. So I go back into the cell. I wait about an hour and then I call my wife and I'm like, hey, what the hell's going on? And she's like, relax. She said, you got bond, you're going to get out. She said, but it might not be till tomorrow because they got to process all the paperwork.
That's good news.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, if I got to do one more night, I'll do one more night, but,
exactly.
But at least I'm getting out. So that was a huge relief because My lawyer even told me sometimes he prefers if people sits in jail for a couple of months. That way he can kind of sneak in there, have a bond hearing, and get them out, and nobody's looking at it. Because my
Mhm.
case is still fresh. They're still talking about it on the news. There's still cars
Right.
at my house. There's still news cars at my house. So
Mhm.
he doesn't necessarily like doing stuff while it's fresh in the news. He likes to let things die down. But in my case, he said, I feel like we've got a good shot at getting you out, which he did. He done his job. And there's still people getting out on up until like 8 o'clock at night. And so I'm thinking, well, I might get out of here. Well, the door opens at probably like 10 o'clock. They call my last name and I hop down off that bed. I mean, just ready to run. And I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm here. Let's go. And he's like, all right, we're transferring you to the C pod. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I was like, I'm getting out of here tomorrow. There's no need for all that. And he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's just the way you come in, man. He said, it's nothing to you. He's like, once they get a certain number of people, whoever's been in here the longest gets transferred to Gen Pop. I was like, well, shit. Okay. And they take me in there. They give me my little orange jumpsuit and give you the 3-in-1 body wash, conditioner, shampoo, toothbrush, cup, toilet paper, all the little goodies that they give you when you go in there.
And
And
Wade, as you might or might not know, because you stayed in that world and didn't head into the prison world, the jail is the worst.
yeah, that's
That
what
that
I've
that
heard.
that is the very worst bottom of the wrong thing that you can be. And for there's a lot of violence in there. It's transitory. When people get to prison, there's still it's not a good place, but it's different because people are living there.
Right.
That's their neighborhood, and the county jail is just a cesspool of bad.
Yeah. And that's what I heard, that people in there were ready to get to prison. They were ready to get
Yes,
to where they were going to be at. There had
yeah,
been a guy recently in that same detention center where I was at that had been stabbed with a mop handle
yeah.
like a week before that. So it wasn't it's
No,
the
you
safest
can
of
die in there. Yeah.
sure. Yeah, for sure. And so they took me to the pod. Just so happened the guy that actually gave me my stuff, he asked me, he said my daughter's name. He's like, you're so and so's dad, ain't you? And I'm kind of looking at him like, how the hell do you know that? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, he said, my wife used to train your daughter from gymnastics. And I'm like, oh,
That's
well,
wild.
yeah, how you doing? I don't really know
Yeah.
what to say. That's kind of an odd way to meet him. But he was like, don't worry. He's like, C-Pod's pretty good. He's like, those guys are, pretty laid back in there. He's like, you'll be fine. You get out tomorrow. And so I go in. At this point, it's probably 11:30-ish, and most everybody's kind of just chilling in their bunks. A couple people playing chess, a couple people reading, a couple people listening to music. Wasn't exactly like the worst case environment that you would want to
Mhm.
walk into, but still, you're in there with some
Yeah, you're on guard.
dudes,
Yeah,
and obviously not a bottom bunk open, as I'm sure you're probably aware of. Those are all taken first.
exactly.
I happened to see a guy that I kind of did talk a little bit with in that holding room, and I asked him if he cared if I got up on top of him, the bunk on top of him. He said no, that was fine. So I got up there. One of, I guess they would call them trustees, come up to me and ask me if I wanted a job, and I'm like, nah. I was like, I'm getting out of here
I'm
tomorrow.
leaving tomorrow, right?
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, well, I won't worry about giving you a job. So it come time to like, he asked me, he said, well, you know how to work the shower, right? I guess these guys assumed I'd been in there before. I am heavily tattooed. I've got
Yeah.
sleeves almost on
That's
both.
how you looked the part. Okay.
They thought I looked apart. They was like, oh yeah, he's like, you know how to work the shower, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I know how. Didn't have a clue what he was talking about. Not a fucking clue. And I go in there to take a shower. Basically, what it is I'm assuming this is like this in all prisons or jails or whatever, but you press the thing in and then it automatically starts coming
It
back
doesn't
out.
stay very long.
Yeah, you get water pressure for like 10 seconds.
Right.
Whatever they had rigged up with this piece of plastic, you could jam in there and keep it on.
Okay.
Figured out how to work it. So I had to take showers in 10-second increments, watch my body part per time I pushed into the lever.
Right.
Luckily, nobody else was in there. They would obviously knew I didn't know what I was doing. But, I got showered, got out, and I'm like, all right, I just got to do one more night and get out of here. And for the most part, I mean, everything went like normal. When I got out the next morning, people were flocking to get everything that they had given me. Hey, can I have your cup? Hey, can I have your toothbrush? Can I have your toilet paper? I'm like, y'all have at it. I don't give a shit.
Yeah. Please. Yeah.
But it just kind of puts it in perspective of what certain things mean that most people in the freedom world take for
Oh
granted.
yeah, for sure.
And so I get home, again, still trying to process. Now I've been locked up. Now I just got bond. I'm at the time was still employed with Nucor. So I'm like, all right, let me call them, make sure everything's good. So I called him. I'm like, hey, I'm out of jail. I don't know what y'all want me to do. And he's like, come in tomorrow and let's talk.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to work and they fired me. As soon as I walked in, he's like, hey, go over to the GM's office. When they said that, I knew what was about to happen. And he's like, Wade, unfortunately for these charges, he's like, we got to let you go. And I'm like, but you just said it. This is charges. I said, I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, you're not convicted.
Yeah. He's like, well, I sincerely hope that's what happens for you. He said, but unfortunately, he said, we got to let you go. We can't keep you here. And so now, again, another sucker punch. I'm getting, fired.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm leaving and I'm like, all right, well, I got to apply for food stamps, Medicaid, everything you can try to get. Mm-hmm. I apply for unemployment. They blocked my unemployment. They said because I breached Nucor's off work conduct policy, they didn't even give me unemployment.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'd give almost 15 years of my life to this company, and they didn't even allow me to get unemployment. So that adds another layer to everything. Now I'm trying to figure out a job. The only silver lining to that was when they fired me, that actually enabled me to get into my 401k. Now at the time, I probably had about 170 grand in there. The lawyer itself was 50 grand to take the case.
Mm-hmm.
Then he wants another 15 to start the ball rolling on investigations, interviews, this, that, and the other. The bond was 100,000 for the murder charge, 50,000 for the weapons charge, which was the lowest you could go for both. So typically it was 15 grand to get out. The lawyer used a bondsman that he knew, so they cut us a little bit better of a deal. So I think it was like 13,000 to get me out of jail. Now my family already knew I was going in. They had the money up to get me out. But once I got fired and I drew out my 401k, I paid everybody back. I paid the lawyer in full. I'm just like, look, here's the 50 plus.
I want you to do a good job.
Yeah. Don't think I'm, doing a $10 a week payment plan.
Right.
You have at it. Go do what you got to do. And, paid up what little bit I had left, paid off a credit card. I think I finished paying off the car that I had just because I didn't know how long I was going to be out of work. And, then the next mode is I can't even really worry about what's going on. I got to worry about a job. Mm-hmm. So luckily I did find a job at a sign company. First I'd interviewed at a place where you would weld up like trash containers. Like once the metal would get bent up and deteriorate, you would cut out an old section, weld the new section in. They got the job. I got the job.
So when you got the job, Wade, did they know about you, or was it just you? You just got the job.
It was just so fast they didn't question it. But see, the container shop place, when they offered me the job there, I told him, I was like, look, this is what just happened to me. And he's like, look, I took a little criminal justice in college. He said, doesn't sound like you done anything wrong to me. He said, but you were upfront, you were honest. I'm good.
Okay.
Well, it run through corporate in Arizona. Corporate wasn't good with it. So they were sending a job offer. So right then I'm already in that boat of, all right, well, if I tell people I got a record, this is probably what's going to keep happening.
Sure.
So the sign company that hired me at the time, I never told him about it. He just assumed, and I kind of was in agreement. He said, so what led you to leave Nucor? I said, well, I'm kind of got tired of the shift work. It was rotating shifts, first shift, third shift. I said, wanted to have something a little bit more stable with, better hours, which wasn't a lie. I did. Right. I was getting tired of that third shift shit. I just didn't tell him the exact specific
the
reason.
Whole thing, right.
And it was so close in succession. I mean, you're talking a week and a half, maybe, since I'd left Nucor. So it didn't look like there was a huge gap in the unemployment. And they hired me. Everything was going great. 2 months in, they come to me and they said, hey, we got a big contract at your old job. I was like, where at? They said, Nucor. Okay. And he said, yeah, we're putting in a big LED board out there for them. And they're putting it in at the front gate. I was like, oh, great. And I knew I wouldn't have to go to do the install, but I had a feeling somebody would talk to somebody that would talk to somebody. And sure enough, they was telling him, yeah, we got a guy that works for us. He used to work out here. Oh, what was his name? Oh, Wade. Oh, I remember him. How'd everything go with that case he was fighting? What case? Oh, he got charged with murder. Nobody there knew. And this kind of plays into the fact of, you've called me two different names since we've been here, Chip and Wade. Wade Williamson is my government name. Chip was a nickname that I got early on in school. All my annuals said Chip. My Facebook, social media said Chip. So when people search Wade Williamson, they would pull up obviously a not so flattering mugshot and some stories. But if they search Chip Williamson, they're going to get me and they're not going to see none of that. So I never changed my name to Wade Williamson. I left it as Chip for that specific reason. And I introduced myself to everybody as Chip because that's what everybody does now. You meet somebody new comes on the job, you Facebook them right off the bat. I didn't need people Facebooking Wade Williamson because you're like, you're going to pull up some bad stuff. So until then, everything was good. Once I knew people found out, it began to feel like an ulcer that was just growing because I knew they knew. They would never send me on jobs that went to like Air Force bases because you had to have clean backgrounds to go. They would never send me on those jobs, but they would send me on everything else. So I knew they knew, but they never said anything. And I think probably enough time had passed. They knew I was a good dude. I showed up to work. I didn't cause any problems, but it was still just uneasy because they didn't know.
Sure. Yeah.
And I worked with them straight up until COVID when they released me. But in the middle of that, the only court date that we had involving this whole thing, I got arrested. I got bond. We had a preliminary hearing in June. We go to the preliminary hearing and the officer, the detective, lies about 5 times on the stand under oath. Some of these lies are minuscule, something to the effect of, the steroids that got brought up. And she said, well, we collected 1 vial of steroids from the other residents. Well, she wrote out a paper saying that she collected 2 vials of steroids from the house. So she contradicted her own self on a paper that she wrote and filled out on the stand. The judge almost tossed it. At the end of it, he said, while I do not see a lot here, this will be tough for the state. I'm going to bind it to trial. So that meant in my mind, I thought that meant we were going to trial. What my lawyer said, he said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to file an immunity hearing based on castle law and self-defense. So that was the next step. Well, as I said, COVID hit. That put a damper on everything in the courts.
Slowed everything down.
Slowed everything down. He told the solicitor, who's the equivalent of the DA, that's our, DAs down here in South Carolina, that he didn't want anything Zoom, Skype, or nothing like that. He was going to do in-person and in-person only. And he was like, he said, if you got a good job or decent job, don't worry, just let it ride. He's like, the longer it goes, sometimes that works out for the better. So that was what we were doing the whole time we were waiting, and COVID hit. That pushed it back even farther. And we never went back to a courtroom.
Wow. Wade, Chip, I just can't imagine what you've got this huge, gigantic gorilla sitting on your back for how many years?
It was like 4.5 by the time it was all said and done.
I mean, are you waking up with it, going to bed with it?
Oh, yeah. You can't help but to. And on top of that, like I said, not only that, I've got to worry about, how's this affecting my kids?
Yeah.
And not long after that, after it first happened, my daughter graduated high school. So I got permission to go to the graduation, but that was it. I couldn't go out to dinner. I couldn't do anything afterwards. I had to go to graduation and come home. I'm sitting there watching her walk across the stage, and I can't even be as happy as I want to be because I'm thinking, damn, am I going to see my son walk across the stage, or am I going to be behind bars?
This might be the last time. Yeah.
You can't even enjoy one little thing without immediately thinking, is this the last birthday? Is this the last, Super Bowl I get to watch at home? Is this the last anything? Whatever the case, it don't matter how big or small, you can't enjoy it because it's immediately followed by that gripping feeling of this. Is this the last time I get to enjoy this? So you got that compounded now with, I know my job knows that I have this charge that I didn't disclose to them, wondering if that's going to come into play. So in the middle of all this, I decided to add a little bit more to my plate, and I started a podcast because I started researching, and I'm like, innocent people can't really go to prison this easy. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
That's really kind of what started the ball rolling. I started researching wrongful conviction podcast. I looked into the Central Park 5. I looked into a bunch of different cases. That kind of foothold me into the true crime genre. And I was like, you know what? I kind of enjoy listening to this. I want to maybe do one. And the more I got to looking, I think everybody in America had that idea. Pandemic, because there was a lot of true crime podcasts.
3 million podcasts out there worldwide.
And so I was like, I got to do something to be a little different for people to get, to click on my show. Plus, to do a good true crime podcast, that takes work, that takes money. You gotta file for information.
A lot of research.
You got to get a lot of research. You got to get cases sometimes that nobody's heard about. There's only so many times people want to listen to, Son of Sam or Ted Bundy before it gets kind of mundane and redundant. Right. And so you got to figure out cases that nobody's heard of, which makes it harder to get information. So I was like, I'm going to call it crime and entertainment, put that little entertainment twist in there, and that'll kind of open the door for me to talk to whoever I want. Mm-hmm. And, as we kind of spoke in the beginning earlier, I've had actors like Tom Sizemore and Tommy Chong on the show. I've had guys from Sopranos and The Wire on the show. I've had, wrestlers.
All great shows, all great actors.
Oh yeah, great shows. And I had, a wrestler on the show. I've had authors on the show. I've had former drug smugglers on the show. I've had former cops, undercover ATF agents, former bikers, porn stars. I mean, you name it, they've been on the show.
Crime and entertainment.
Yeah, crime and entertainment. Sometimes they do a little of both. Sometimes it's one or the other.
Right, exactly.
And that was really, to tell you the truth, it was really an outlet. Brent.
I bet it was an escape.
It was. I was able to talk to people. I'm a very social person. I like to talk. I like to conversate. So that's the equivalent of me being able to go to the bar and just strike up a conversation with the guy next to me. I'm just able to do it on a podcast. And originally it was just me and my buddy. We were covering a few things here and there. And slowly but surely I started getting interviews, and then it kind of snowballed. And now the buddy doesn't do it with me anymore. He just done it with me as a favor till I got started. He said, I knew you would get to the point where you didn't need me. He said, I just helped you. And now it's nothing but interviews.
Yeah.
And as that got rolling, I made some contacts with a guy that was involved with the Gambinos out of New York.
Yeah.
He was in tight with a lot of guys from the movie Goodfellas, and he knew John Gotti personally. John Gotti bought him a Cadillac to try to help him get on his feet. And he came on the show, and I kind of tossed around some ideas that I had and some things I wanted to do. And he's like, see if you can, or he's like, come up to New York. He's like, if you can, he's like, come to New York. We'll go film some stuff in a studio. Well, I'm on house arrest. I can't go, can't leave the state.
They don't like that. Right.
Yeah. They frown on that if you just jump states. And I had to ask for permission to go. And I was like, you tell them this is not a BS excuse to go out of state. I was like, I've got a podcast. I've got a YouTube channel. I'm monetized. It's a legit stream of income. Might not be that much, but it is a business. And, I've got this opportunity. So by this time, the solicitor has changed a couple times. And the solicitor that was in, charge at this time, he's like, yeah, I don't see why not. Let him go. So a part of that in my mind is like, how worried can they really be?
But they're just letting you travel everywhere.
Because I didn't have an anklet on me. Like I didn't have a monitor. I never checked in with my bondsman. They never told me to. Yeah. When I went out of state, I had to tell them when I was leaving and check in when I got back just by a phone call. But that was it. I think they knew I was paying all that money to that lawyer. I wasn't going to take off.
True.
Plus he took my whole 401k. I didn't have any money to take off.
Right. Exactly. You weren't going to be skipping countries.
Yeah. So I go to New York, podcast goes good. We do some good shows. They invite me back a couple of months later. This was in July of last year, end of August, they invite me back. So we got to ask for permission again, whole spiel. And, the lawyer this time, he's like, look, this is going on 5 years. He said, y'all have held this man's life up for a long time. He said, I don't typically like to tip my hand. He said, but I'm going to make a deal with you. He said, I'll show you everything that we have. He said, I'll give you everything we got. And he said, I believe that it'll be so damn powerful that you will not even really want to try to take this any further.
Strong move.
Yeah. And that's what he said. He said, this is a ballsy move to do. He said, but I think we have enough of a case to pull it off. And so they gave me permission to go to New York. Now, these guys don't have a clue. None of these people in New York have a clue. I've never told anybody about it. It's all stay quiet. Never mentioned it on my show. None of my guests knew it. Nobody knew it.
Real street cred.
Yeah. And I never mentioned it. And I didn't want people to think I was using that as a springboard.
Sure.
I knew there would become a time like now where I could
when you can talk about it,
use it as a message for people that it can happen. But I didn't want to do it before, obviously, while it was still going on.
Exactly.
I go to New York the second time. Everything goes good. in the middle of all that, we had flew out this forensics guy from New York. And he basically done, if you've watched any CSI show where they do the laser bullet pass, you know, telling you where somebody was standing and all this. He done that from the wall back to the refrigerator, back to the corner, which put me in the corner. A fact that I found out way late, years later. I never even knew. They found a shell casing in the sink.
Okay.
So that even more proved my point of where I was standing. I'm in the corner, the sink's to my right, the stove's to my left, the refrigerator's right across from me. If you shoot a gun, everybody knows the projectiles go up and back, you know, straight out the gun to the back. It landed in the sink. I had no idea it landed in the sink. So he put together a whole PowerPoint. Their reasons for charging me was he said there was a struggle before the shooting. We didn't see signs of a struggle. He took the first arriving officer's body cam footage and he zeroed in on a shot glass that was knocked over on the floor. He zeroed in on another shot glass that was knocked over on the counter, plus another like Manhattan rocks glass that was knocked over. Pretty heavy glass, not no, you know, solo cup. It was a glass. He's like, all right, well, that right there is proof of a struggle. So we don't really know where you're getting that there was no struggle. Then blood spatter was a big deal. They said, you know, this guy was wearing a white long sleeve shirt. He shot a guy supposedly at close range, but yet he's not got any blood on him. I never seen blood the entire time.
Right.
When I lifted up his shirt, I had to look to find the holes because they were very, very small. Looked like the tip of an eraser off of a number 2 pencil. I never seen blood. The 911 operator told me to go get a towel, place it over his wounds. I did that. That's where I left it. And even the towel didn't really have a lot of blood on it. And they was like, well, you know, he said he tried to do life-saving measures, but there's no evidence of that. I'm like, well, I can tell you, he didn't go get that towel and put it on his chest. Like, I was the only other person in the house. How the hell do you think that towel got there?
Yeah.
It was just blowing holes in every reason.
Everything.
The Full Metal Jacket rounds, because we were so close in proximity, were through and through. He happened to be wearing 3 shirts. So he had on like a t-shirt, a longer shirt over that, and then like a long sleeve wicking shirt, like a Under Armour type shirt over all that. So he had on 3 layers of clothes. So you're not going to get that transfer out under 3 layers of clothes. You don't even really get that sometimes if there's no clothes. Like, it all depends on the caliber of bullet, a bunch of different factors. So the fact that there was none did not mean that we were further apart. And the fact that they said that really hurt him, because they said, you know, we believe there was a greater distance. Well, if you put him further away, those bullets don't have time to separate. They're in succession. They would be right beside each other on that refrigerator. He was so far close to me that once they went through, they had time to go apart. So one hits the right side of the refrigerator, the other hits a pack of water sitting completely beside the refrigerator. Had he been further back like they tried to say he was, they wouldn't have had time to do that. They would have hit almost side by side.
Close. Yeah.
So they tried to paint a picture that really screwed themselves, is what they did. And so we gave them that whole PowerPoint that the guy put together. We actually brought them to the house. The solicitor, his number 2, I think a CSI guy came.
So they walked the whole scene.
Walked the whole scene. We put him right there. And when you do that, it really puts things into perspective.
Sure.
You can see that this kitchen is not very big. The guy was, I think, a little above 6 foot. So there's only so much of an area he has to be laying there. And when where he was laying, we showed him pictures of where he was laying. I was like, all right, you stand him up. He's right in front of me. The autopsy report shows entry wounds higher, exit wounds lower. How do you get that? You get that if somebody's crouched over coming at you in an attack mode. That's how you get a higher entry and a lower exit. So everything was there. And, you know, you could tell they were taking it in. You could tell that they were being receptive to it, and they left. This was probably like, you know, mid-September. Never heard it. It might've been August. It might've still been in August. Never heard anything through September. Never heard anything, you know, through the beginning of October. Then finally, I'm at work one day, sick. I had the flu. I was sick as a dog, and my phone rung up. I seen my lawyer. So I answered the phone, and he's like, you know, Wade, it's Andy Savage. I was like, what's going on, man? He said, I just called to see what it was like to talk to a free man.
Wow.
I'm telling you, I broke down in tears, man. It was,
I bet you did, man.
Finally, fine. I'm like, you serious? And he's like, I'm serious. He's like, case dismissed. He's like, your good name is back. He's like, we'll work on getting your expungement done. That way everything's off your record. He's like, you're free to come get your weapons. I had a lot of other guns that due to my bond, I
they've
had to,
taken.
I couldn't have them. So I gave them to him and he kept them at his office. And he's like, you can come up here and get your guns whenever you're ready. He's like, everything's done, brother. Congratulations.
Chip,
And
man, I can tell you that just doesn't happen that often. It
no,
just
yeah,
doesn't. You had mentioned, I was listening to your interview with Cox, and you were talking about Russ Faria, and I
yeah,
had him on the show, and actually had his attorney on the show too, Joel Swartz, and that situation, I think he served 3 years, and the whole thing was wrong. I mean, from the beginning was wrong, and your story, the reason why I think your story is so fascinating is that, and maybe it is because having an attorney but I think there's decent and really good attorneys that aren't able to get through that maze. But you were able to get through the maze, and that just doesn't happen very often.
Well, and one thing too, I think that helped was in Russ's case, obviously someone killed his wife
Yeah.
in very bad timing. He happened to be the first one home.
Yeah.
Although anybody that listens to true crime podcast, the significant others usually always one of the first people looked at. In his situation,
always.
It made it worse because he just happened to come right after this whole thing took place. But they still should have been able to. When I heard, I've actually interviewed Russ myself.
Yeah.
When they got to the point to where killed him for insurance, he's like, why would I need to kill her for insurance? Like, she's got stage 4 cancer.
Yeah. She was dying of cancer. Right.
Yeah. You're talking months left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you do decide to, I guess the term would be like mercy kill somebody. This doesn't sound like a mercy kill that what happened to his wife.
Well, and it didn't. And the other thing that didn't match up with Russ is that he had been at a game night deal, and all the guys said that he was there, and there was no way that he could have done it when they said he did it. And then he also went through a drive-through. The whole thing was so wrong.
Yeah. Multiple accounts
going with
nowhere near there.
Yeah,
those are the types of cases, man, that I've really tried to, since my stuff has been over, to bring to light, because people do not realize how easy it can happen to them, how quick things can change. Russ had no idea this was going on. Like you said, he had been in a basketball game. He stopped fast food. He gets home, finds this, and the next thing you know, he's going to jail.
Yeah. And was in for 3 years. I mean, and he could have been in for life. And then he gets out, and she tries to frame him again.
Yeah.
Well, now she's in for life. But quite a deal. It's a fascinating story, Chip, on your whole thing. I mean, I was listening to it. I went and walked the dogs last night, and I was still listening to it because, you never signed up for that. And now you walk through that whole world, and you see that other side of the world. And in a lot of cases too, Chip, is you have a situation where somebody like yourself will take a plea.
Yeah.
And you take like manslaughter or something, so that, they say, hey, you're going to go, life without parole. You're looking at 25, 30 years. And somebody will say, well, give me something else. Well, we'll give you, 10 or 15 years if you take this plea. And you see a lot of that because people get scared and they don't, and luckily you didn't have to take that second step to have to go before the court, that there was sanity put back into it. And luckily you had a new attorney that was looking at it and saying, wait a minute, this doesn't even make sense. All this stuff stacked up here. What are we going to say?
And obviously my feelings towards the law enforcement that put all this into motion aren't necessarily the greatest, but I shout that solicitor out for looking at it with a new
absolutely
set, seeing it for what it was. Yeah. It was a huge deal. It was a gamble because he's new and missing.
Well, usually it's a stepping stone, and they'll take and prosecute anyway just to see if it can happen.
Yeah, just to see what it, almost sometimes just to save face. Well, hey,
spend all this time, all this money.
Yeah, in his case, he could have been like, well, we tried, but I done the best I could with what I had. This wasn't even my mess.
Exactly.
That could have been his outlook, but it wasn't. And he looked at it from a proper set of eyes. And man, I shout that dude out if I see him in the streets.
Oh man, absolutely.
Coca-Cola or whatever he drinks, for sure.
I got a question for you, Chip, because after going through, because you lived a pretty normal life up to this point, you
Yeah.
know, yeah, you had some stuff happen and then kind of went through some depression stuff and the wife stuff, but going through the journey that you went through, what do you think is your biggest takeaway through all this to impart to the listeners out there?
My biggest takeaway is, you really got, even though life might not necessarily be the way you want it at
Mm-hmm.
one particular time. I think everybody, regardless of where they're at in life, always desires a little bit more, maybe wishes one thing was different, but you really have to appreciate life, while you have it, because in the blink of an eye it can be taken away
Change.
or it
Yeah.
can be changed and turned upside down. That night there was two choices. Either he would have been committed to his word and he killed me, which after
Mhm.
that time he could have went and then subsequently killed my wife, my
Yep.
daughter, my son, then himself.
Yep.
Or the way it happened, turns out it was the other way around. And I, defended myself and ultimately he lost his life. But then it turned my world upside down. So it's like, is there really a win? And
Right.
that, I mean, it took away, it was a big toll on my family. It was a big toll on me mentally, physically,
Mm.
emotionally. And, one thing that I've learned is, you've got to appreciate life as you have it. It
Yep.
might not be
The
what
here
you
and now,
want. Yeah,
the
the here
present.
and now. I had
Great
to take
advice.
lesser paying jobs because obviously I've got a pending murder charge on my record that doesn't fare too well in the interview process.
Right.
They're looking through there, oh, you done
Yeah.
this, you done this, oh, and you're
Oh.
with murder. Well, we'll get back to you. You know, so you got to take lesser paying jobs.
Yeah.
So again, things weren't where I wanted them, but at the
Yeah.
same time, you got to look at the good too. Like you said, I was not in prison. A lot of people in my position, go to prison. If you don't have the
Yeah.
money for a good lawyer, you're stuck with a public defender.
Yeah.
They're basically nothing but glorified plea bargainers. They try to,
Yep.
like you said,
That is their job.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're facing 15 years, man. If you just take this plea and do
Be
10
done with it.
behavior, you be out in 8, you have a life left. And, if not, you could go for double that. So that's what they do.
Yeah.
And, there's no doubt in my mind that had I not had access to that, because I'm not a rich man by any means. If I hadn't had that 401k that my
Yeah.
job had given me at that point to dip into to pay this guy,
Yeah.
I might very well not be talking to you right now, because
Very
there's
true.
no doubt in my mind that people are in jail right now for things they did not do simply because they did not have the money to get proper legal representation.
Yeah, and I've interviewed quite a few, and there's a thing in Michigan where they had a integrity unit project where they've released, I think it's the last I heard, 36 men who were wrongly convicted, and most of them of murder. And if you think about that, that's 36 men in Michigan. Think about that across the country. It's staggering to think about.
And that's just the ones that, they found out about. That's like you said, that's not even counting the ones that took plea deals that nobody's looking at.
Nobody even knows about. They're not looking at because they
Yeah.
pled guilty.
Yeah, they're not even looking at them because they pled guilty. Exactly. So the number is probably even more staggering. I had a guy by the name of Jeffrey Deskovic on my show that done 16 years. He actually, after he got out, became a lawyer himself and helped free a guy by the name of Andre Brown that done 23 years. And he just got out this past December. First time he had been able to spend Christmas with his family in 23 years. They were doing him a 20-year sentence for attempted murder, 20 years each sentence, running consecutively, not concurrent. So he was already into his second 20-year sentence, and they appealed and it got turned over for ineffective counsel. And they're trying to appeal it to put him back in, but at least right now he's out and
He's free.
23 years.
Wow.
The stories that you can get into, man,
Oh,
will
yeah.
make people literally jaw drop when you start to figure it out. And that's really one thing that I'm going to keep doing the show. I enjoy it. We're going to keep having fun.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Chip. Where do they get to you? Because I mean, it was easy to find you on YouTube, but can you tell everybody where to direct to?
Absolutely. On YouTube, it's Crime and Entertainment. And then we're on Instagram, Crime, the letter N and Entertainment, Facebook, Crime and Entertainment with the and symbol. And we're on all audio platforms as well. So if you got Spotify, Google, Amazon, Stitcher, Apple, I mean, iHeartRadio, we're across the board. We have a Buzzsprout account, so that just kind of disperses us to all
It
the
does. It distributes it all
the
out. And I might say, because we're both podcasters here, Chip, and man, if you like what you hear, share it, because it's such a big deal to share that out. And also, if you like it, either Chips or Nightmare Success, leave a review on Apple, because that kind of puts the place on steroids.
Yeah, get you in that algorithm, man. People don't understand how
it's a
big
weird
of a deal that
algorithm,
is.
but it is. And if you try to get a hold of me, go to BrentCassidy.com. I'm the guy that spells Cassidy wrong. It's not like Shauna David. It's ITY. But yeah, leave me a message there too. I love go back and forth there. If you're still looking for a book out there, I wrote one, Nightmare Success, and it's easy to find on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart. And like I used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth at 11, where stay strong, and I'll do the same. Pip Williamson, man, what a story. Thanks for being my guest today.
Hey, man, no problem. Like I said, it was a pleasure being on your show, and hopefully we'll have to get you on mine someday, because you got a pretty good story as well.
We'll do that. Nightmare Success, in and out. We'll talk to you all later.